"Excuse me, ma'am, this seat isn't for you." The flight attendant's voice was sharp, her eyes narrowing at the young black woman who sat calmly in first class. Passengers turned, some whispering, some smirking, as if waiting for her to be escorted away. But the woman didn't move. She simply held her boarding pass tighter, her chest rising and falling as the pressure grew heavier. The attendant leaned closer, her tone colder. "You'll need to move back here where you belong." Belong. In that instant, the entire cabin went silent. What happened next stunned everyone, especially when the pilot got involved. So whose side do you think he was on? Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow the story gets even bigger. Her name was Danielle Carter, a 32-year-old marketing executive who had worked her way up from nothing. Raised by a single mother who often worked 2 jobs, Danielle knew the meaning of sacrifice. She'd spent years grinding, late nights, long hours, endless rejections, until her dedication finally paid off. That morning, she was boarding a flight to present at the biggest pitch of her career. If she succeeded, it could open doors she had dreamed about for years. Clutching her leather bag and first-class ticket, Danielle felt a surge of pride, not because of the comfortable seat she'd earned, but because it represented how far she'd come. For once, she wasn't crammed in the back row. She was stepping into a space that, in her mind, she had every right to claim. But as she settled into her seat, she noticed the stares. A man across the aisle eyed her like she didn't belong. A couple whispered behind their hands, glancing her way. Danielle brushed it off, telling herself it was nothing. She put on her headphones, tried to focus on her notes. Then, heels clicking sharply down the aisle, the flight attendant stopped right in front of her. The woman's polite smile didn't reach her eyes. "Ma'am," she said softly at first, "this seat may not be yours." Danielle's heart skipped. She had the ticket. She had every right. So why in that moment did she suddenly feel like the entire cabin was against her? Danielle blinked, her grip tightening on the boarding pass. "No, this is my seat," she said, keeping her voice steady. She handed the attendant her ticket, but the woman barely glanced at it before shaking her head. "There must be some mistake," the attendant insisted. "First class is fully booked. You'll need to return to economy." Danielle's chest tightened. Fully booked. She had the ticket in her hand, printed, paid, confirmed. Her throat went dry, but she tried again. "This is my assigned seat. Please check again." The attendant's polite mask slipped. Her lips curled into a thin smile that wasn't kind at all. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult. People are waiting to sit down." Eyes burned into Danielle from every direction. A man in a business suit muttered, "Figures." Another shook his head, as though he already knew how this story would end. Danielle's ears rang with the sound of muffled snickers. Her stomach churned. She had been here before, not on a plane, but in boardrooms, in interviews, in stores where clerks followed her down aisles. Places where she always felt she had to prove she belonged. And here it was again, in front of dozens of strangers, on a plane that hadn't even left the runway. She drew a shaky breath. "I'm not moving. I paid for this seat." The attendant's expression hardened. She crossed her arms. "Then I'll have to call security." The words hit like a punch. Security. On a plane. Danielle could already picture the headlines, the stares, the humiliation of being dragged away for simply existing where someone thought she shouldn't be. A murmur spread through the cabin. Some passengers looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Others smirked, eager for the scene to unfold. Danielle felt her pulse hammering in her ears. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, but a lump had lodged in her throat. The attendant turned, already signaling to another crew member. Danielle's hands shook as she pulled out her phone, snapping a picture of her ticket, of her seat, of the woman glaring at her. If she was going to be humiliated, she wanted proof. That tiny act of defiance made the attendant's voice rise. "Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, this flight will be delayed because of you." Because of you, as though Danielle were the problem, as though she were less than. Just then, footsteps echoed down the aisle, strong, deliberate. The passengers' chatter hushed, and Danielle looked up to see the captain himself striding toward them. His jaw was set, his eyes sharp. He glanced at Danielle, then at the attendant. "What seems to be the issue here?" he asked, his tone cutting through the tension like a blade. The attendant straightened. "Captain, this passenger is sitting in a seat that isn't hers. I was about to have her removed." Danielle's breath caught. Removed. In that second, she wondered if the captain would believe her or side with the woman who saw her as an intruder. The cabin held its breath, waiting. The captain's eyes moved slowly from the attendant to Danielle. Silence pressed down on the cabin like a weight. Danielle's palms were slick, her throat dry, as if every heartbeat echoed loud enough for the entire plane to hear. "Show me your boarding pass," the captain said firmly. With trembling hands, Danielle held it out. He studied it for a long moment. "Row 2, seat A, her name, everything correct." Danielle exhaled shakily, convinced this would finally end. But then the attendant spoke, her voice dripping with condescension. "Captain, you know what's happening here. These seats are reserved for our premium passengers." She clearly bought the wrong ticket. A hush swept through the cabin. Danielle's chest burned as her voice cracked. "I am a premium passenger. I worked hard for this. Enough," the attendant snapped, cutting her off. Her hand hovered inches from Danielle's arm, ready to drag her up. Danielle flinched, shame and rage colliding in her chest. Every pair of eyes on her felt like judgment. And then the captain's voice thundered. "Stop, do not touch her." The attendant froze. Passengers gasped. The captain stepped forward, his posture commanding. He raised the ticket for all to see. "This woman is exactly where she belongs. She paid for this seat. She deserves this seat. And if anyone here has a problem with that, they can leave my plane." The air shifted. The whispers died instantly. Danielle's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. For the first time since boarding, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. But the question lingered heavy in the silence. Why did it take the captain's word for her humanity to finally be acknowledged? The rest of the flight passed in uneasy silence. The attendant avoided Danielle's row, her forced smile plastered on for everyone else. Passengers who had once smirked now stole guilty glances, though none dared to speak. Danielle sat upright, her hands folded tightly in her lap, not out of comfort, but out of survival. She had won the right to stay in her seat, but the victory felt hollow. When the plane finally landed, a few strangers whispered words of support as they passed. "Sorry you had to go through that. Stay strong." But most walked by without a word, eager to escape the tension they had witnessed. Danielle stepped off the plane with her head high, yet her chest heavy. She had the proof, the ticket, the pictures, even the captain's defense. But she also carried something far heavier, the reminder that no matter how hard she worked, how high she climbed, there would always be moments when someone tried to tell her she didn't belong. That's the reality so many people live with every day. They can do everything right, earn the degrees, pay the price, follow the rules, and still their presence alone is questioned. Still, their worth is doubted. Danielle didn't just fight for a seat on that flight. She fought for her dignity, and she shouldn't have had to. So here's the question. How many times will stories like hers play out before we decide enough is enough? Because racism doesn't always scream, it whispers, it smiles politely, it hides behind excuses, but its impact is just as crushing. And if we don't speak up, if we stay silent in those moments, whose side are we really on?